Hello and welcome to A Fountain of Useless Information, a micro podcast hosted by Ann O'Connor. Each 15-minute episode will feature a person, much like yourself, who knows something unusual, interesting, and maybe even zany that is near and dear to their heart. Genealogy, tracing your family back through generations, is a popular pastime. Kathy Blackwell, a teacher now living on Cape Cod, used easily available online resources but had a special resource to use in her quest to find family in Ireland. Her dad, former Fitchburg Mayor Beau Blackwell, recorded his mother's memories of the Fair Isle, which gave Kathy a good starting place.
It began, I would say, as a child, hearing the stories from my grandmother and her sisters. They were very entertaining. They loved to talk. They loved to tell the old stories about when they were kids, and they would talk about their parents and grandparents and just stories. And I would always listen, and I always heard about this place, Ardnagriva. And I remember my parents going over to Ireland when I was a teenager, I guess. My mom was trying to get citizenship for Ireland. Her grandmother came over, but they couldn't find the paperwork, and she never was able to do it. So then when I was an adult and my dad was doing, looking around in Lowell to find his grandparents came from Ireland. So I had Irish on both sides and also Scottish on my mom's father was from Scotland. I started really paying attention, and then I started to apply for my dream since I was 16 to be a Fulbright participant. And I got accepted to be a Fulbright teacher exchange participant, and it was in Scotland. Over the years, I had kept track of things, and then my dad, after he died, I got his big bag of research. And when I knew I was going to Scotland, I started really, I joined Ancestry.com and started finding names and places where people had lived. And I was like, well, when I'm over there, I'm going to track whatever I can down. And I actually met a cousin in Scotland, and where my grandfather grew up near Glasgow, and walked the streets in the towns where he lived and his parents lived over there in Scotland. Then went over to Ireland and had a 2-week vacation over there, and was on the hunt for Ardnagriva, the place I had always heard about, the place of rocks, and it's in Connemara, which is totally full of rocks. And
what part of the island is Connemara?
Connemara is on the west side above Galway, and there's the Aran Islands out there, and the Inish Islands, and Achill Island. There's a bunch of little islands out there, and my dad had always said they came in from the islands. And so I was putting all these little pieces together that I had heard, and these little scraps of paper, which I still have, which I would write when my aunts came over for dinner and Christmas or Thanksgiving, and putting all these things together. And so when I went to Scotland and found all that information, then I went to Ireland, and my friend and we rented a house, and we spent a day to drive to try to find Ardnagriva. I had the map, and she was driving because they drive very fast, and the roads are very small. It was just a little tiny road along by the sea. We were driving, and I was like, I think we should be there by now. It looks like on the map, like we should be there. It was along the ocean, and she said, oh, well, there's a man. Let's stop and ask him. He was on the side of the road. So we pulled over, and he says, how can I help you? And we said, well, we're looking for Ardnagriva. And he says, well, you're in it. And we were like, oh, yay, we're in it. He says, what are you looking for? And we said, I'm looking for the coins, my family. And he said, oh, Jesus, Carmel, get out here. They're looking for the coins. So he insisted we come in and have tea and talk about the coins. The coins lived directly across the street from them, and they had known Packy Coin for their whole lives. And these people are in their 60s. They told us stories. They couldn't believe that we were there. For them, it was as amazing as it was for me. You know, I told them I lived on Cape Cod and near Boston, and they knew other people that had come looking for relatives. Carmel took me to the graveyard, to the school, up the mountain a little bit. We drove all around. And then we went back to the house, and we had to get back because we had a long drive ahead of us. And she said, well, wait a minute. And she went out in the back room and came out with a little box and said, you have to take this. It was Packy coins. And I said, I wasn't even sure it was, my relative for sure. She said, oh, it is. It's your people. It's your people. You have to take it. And it was his pocket watch. It was amazing. I cried and cried. She said, we've had it a long time. Packy would want you to have it, and you got to take it. So I have it, and it's one of my treasures of my life.
I'll bet. Now, that mountain that you mentioned, is that the one with the path on it?
Yeah. That mountain she showed me from a distance. It was a ways away, a couple miles anyway. And she said, can you see there's a line in the mountain? And I said, yes. And she said, that's a path that's worn in the hill, in the mountain. And that's where the children would come over that mountain and come to school. She said the little ones would be carried by the big ones. Many of them would be barefoot, and they would walk down that mountain and over through these other little hills and come to school. And she showed me the old schoolhouse. She said no matter what the weather was, they'd come.
As a teacher, this mountain must have spoken to you.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. Now, this must have meant a lot for you because it was shortly after your dad died, right?
Exactly. It was very, very meaningful because we had always wanted to go together. We had never made it. I actually carried over a little jewelry box with some of his ashes in it, and I buried them under a tree in Connemara, actually. I knew he would want me to do that, and I did that. So I had this little box that had just fit the ashes, and it was empty now. I put Packy Coin's pocket watch in the same little box. Yeah, it was almost like it was meant to be. Like, you're going to empty that box, but you're going to fill it back up with something very, very special.
So you said you did research and stuff before you went. What did that entail?
Well, I joined Ancestry.com to begin with, and that was now 2011, so that was quite a while ago. It has gotten so much better since then, and I did find many, many relatives through there. Yeah, so that was one of the tools that I used. Also, the notes and scraps of paper and the research my father had done. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates. Marriage certificates have the parents' names on them. So then I found the link to the island they were from, which was Inishbofin, and I never knew that before. And I think without Ancestry, I don't know if I would have found that. Also, there were other organizations that I haven't really used that much. I have looked on Ireland.com and nationalarchives.ie. The Mormon group has myheritage.com, and they have records from all over the world. Like FamilySearch.org is another one.
Tell me how this search and what you have found and learned through it, how has that affected you?
The trip over to Scotland for a year, and then the trip over to Ireland when I was there, just opened my eyes to first of all, the land that I came from, the people that are my people. I met a couple of cousins in Ireland, and I was like, I look like them. And the way they are, the way they laugh, the stories they tell, it was all so familiar to me. And it was like seeing my grandmother again, who has, been gone for a long time. It was like seeing my people. On the way over to Inishbofin on the ferry, we had not even barely started, and this woman came over to me and said, I'm so happy to see you. I said, oh, hello. And she said, where have you been? Is your husband all right? I said, I don't think I'm the person you're thinking I am. I don't have a husband. She said, oh my God, you used to come into my restaurant like every week, remember? I said, where's your restaurant? And she said, somewhere in Ireland. I said, no, that's not me. She said, oh my God, you are a twin. You are her twin.
Oh,
and that
funny.
Really was spooky. Like, she was right next to me. She was, a foot away, and she thought I was this woman. So that was incredible. And then meeting my cousin, Marie Coyne, on Inishbofin she's my fourth cousin. And then this cousin, Jimmy Hainu, I was like, these are direct people in my bloodline. And that was incredible to me. I have a new sense of who I am, why I am the way I am. Strong people, hardy people that don't give up. I live in a house with stone walls all around me. The whole street I live on is fields and stone walls on the Cape. And I don't think that's by chance. I think that's because that's what is in my soul. I think I looked for that, not really knowing where I lived in Fitchburg also was stone walls. And maybe that's because my mother had it in her blood, and that's where she wanted to live, in a place that was familiar. I mean, it feels like that to me. And I did find out that my great-grandparents were from Ackle. They got married on Ackle Island. I've always wanted to live on an island since I was a little girl. I almost got a job on Cuttyhunk Island. I almost got a job on Cranberry Island in Maine. I've tried very hard to live on an island. And I had no idea why. People were like, it's going to be hard. I said, not for me. I write. I love walking out where there's nothing in the wildness. And when I was on Inishbofin, I was like, oh my God, this is why. I think there's a lot more of our ancestry in our souls than we understand.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, people now are talking about intergenerational trauma, but maybe there's intergenerational good things too.
Yeah, memories, pictures in your head of where your ancestors were from. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hated the freckles. Everybody there has freckles. So I feel much more settled, I guess, about who I am and what I look like and all of that. It's a good feeling. And I love raw potatoes with salt on them.
Oh, I don't like potatoes.
My mother always, when she was cutting up the potatoes, she'd cut up a couple pieces for her and put salt on them and eat them. And I love those too.
I would have told you that was poisonous.
I know. People think I'm crazy.
Kathy, thank you.
Thank you.
In addition to the online resources Kathy mentioned, many local libraries host genealogy groups, which might lend a guiding hand. Shlante. A Fountain of Useless Information is hosted, produced, and edited by Ann O'Connor. Do you have an idea for the podcast? You can reach Ann through her website, annoc.com, ANNEOC.com, on Facebook at Our History AOC, or by calling or texting 978-958-0054. All music on the podcast is in the public domain or is written and performed by the host and guests of the podcast. A Fountain of Useless Information was recorded at the Fitchburg Access Television Studios in Fitchburg. They are on the web at fatv.org.